wine. All things.
All right, joining me tonight, Mr. Nathan Singleton. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Thanks for doing this. Looking forward to catching up with you and talking to you for way longer than I've ever talked to you before. But
Like I saw you at Blackheart, right? We used to play together.
Yeah, man, we shared a few stages together, and I always enjoyed the bands you were in, especially Sideshow Tragedy. But kind of give us a little rundown of what you've been up to through the whole lockdown. Obviously, it's been a long one now, almost a year. But how did it, shake things up for you guys, yourself personally, the band, the projects you have? When it started, how did you cope and manage with it through those middle parts of the summer? And what have you been up to kind of the last couple months to try to, keep yourself vital as you can during these weird times?
Yeah, it's the shit is weird. Is this like is there a FCC guidelines? Okay.
You can let the expletives fly.
Okay. I'll try to be more creative than that, but we'll see. It's been weird for everyone, right? But it's, I guess the thing is we just put out a record in October, and that record was supposed to come out in July, when we had met with the label and come up with the big plan and everything. And then we were going to tour, and we were supposed to be in Europe in last November and October. And so, yeah, we had big plans like everybody did. And when the thing first started, we just shelved the whole idea. We're like, let's just see what happens. And as I was thinking, maybe it would go for, I don't know, what people were like, it started in March, and people will be like, well, it's going to go until June, or whatever the predictions were. And we just, after it was apparent that this was going to be some ongoing thing, and it's sort of, this like never ending thing, we're still in it. I just decided to put the record out. So, we came up with like a plan with the, publicist and all of that type of thing. And we wanted to get it out before the election. So that's why it came out on October 30th, which was the Friday before the election.
Okay.
We just didn't want it, we wanted to be able to ramp up to it with some publicity that was not going to be drowned in,
whatever may come after the
and all of that, so
yeah.
which, and of course that it's been with the pandemic. It's been kind of good and bad, because I feel like there's no touring right now, and I do feel like there's like a lot of music writers and stuff like that have been kind of, I don't know, people need music, I think it's important. Art, things like this. We don't get paid for it. Nobody wants to pay for it, but people need it, like in like I don't know, some kind of spiritual way. And especially in a, time like this. So I feel like, because in some ways, like there were, in terms of publicity, everybody's at the same level on the internet or in the, world of streaming music or whatever you want to call it. It's not as much about promoting shows and stuff like that, because they're just really not really happening. So it seemed like kind of an opportunity to get the record out and have it heard, and actually have like a, decent release, a successful release and stuff like that, and not have to worry about touring and advanced publicity in towns and, all the logistics and stuff like that. So that part was kind of good, but it was really weird not to go on tour right after you put a record out. It kind of feels like it still hasn't happened, I guess.
Yeah.
And as far as what I've been up to is just, I don't know, writing. I write songs and just, try not to go crazy, I guess.
Yeah, well, congratulations on the new album. It sounds really, really great. I've been listening to it a bunch the last couple of days. Sounds great. Congratulations on the product itself. Obviously, I think most of us have been in a situation about how to release, when to release, all that stuff. I've just been doing singles. I had planned to kind of switch to singles before the COVID thing hit, so I've just been trying to do that. But no, I'm like, I got to put an album out at some point. But yeah, I know you guys, just from kind of following you guys over the years. I know you guys had been and have been to Europe a few times, right?
Yeah, we've done it like we've done Europe like 7 times, I think.
Oh,
Which
wow.
is, I
That's
mean,
amazing, dude.
it's France and Belgium, Holland. We haven't. We were supposed to go to Spain a couple years ago, and that didn't happen. But I mean, it's weird. Like, I mean, I feel like Americans think of Europe as Europe, but like Europe in Europe is very like, oh, we don't know anybody. Like in France, they're like, we don't know anybody in Spain. Even though it's just it's strange because to tour the European continent is the same as touring the United States in terms of like how long it would take and how many towns there are and distance and geography. But the United States is comparatively speaking is I mean, I don't know about now, but comparatively it's one culture, and that's like a
Right.
lot of different places and stuff. So
Yeah.
I've just been sort of like just knocking on doors and stuff, and every time we go to Europe, we try to make more contacts, but you need a promoter in every country, or not necessarily. I mean, it helps to have like just a team in every place. For us, it's been like we got Belgium crew, got French crew, and it's sort of like it's like every country is a country for sure. Like
Right.
we've been going over
Have you?
there for 7 years now.
That's outstanding, man. Yeah, I've gotten to do a lot in the States, but never been over, and I want to. Have you found the same amount of success there? Less success? More success?
Oh, way more.
Not. Oh, that's good to hear. And you hear about that happening, so
No,
that's great to hear.
a lot of times in the I mean, outside of like certain markets in the United States, I mean, there's lots of different reasons for it, I think, but it's I mean, most of places that we played, I don't know. There was a time, I think probably around 2013 to 2015 where it seemed like maybe it was going to be our moment, or we were having a moment and we didn't know it at the time, but and then it sort of tapered off after that. In terms of the United States, but in a ton of places, it felt like we're just spinning our wheels here. And I think a lot of the reason is, because there's so many bands, so many great bands, and Americans are just kind of spoiled in that way,
Mm-hmm.
and also, but then versus going to Europe for us has been like every time we go, it's like a step further down the road that we're trying to go. Which I don't know if it's like, it's just a different kind of music fan, a different kind of music scene, a different culture in most places.
More appreciative, I've heard. Is
Yeah,
that right?
more appreciative of the arts in general. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it's some sort of regression. I think that historically speaking, the United States has never been a place that appreciated the arts. It's founded by Puritans, so it's all about working hard and making money and
Mm-hmm.
not as much about pleasure and
Mm-hmm.
the arts and poetry and things like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's very different, very different.
Mm.
But
Cool, brother. Well, I
also,
want to hear more about that.
I was just to say
What's that?
I'm just very much expressing my own personal value system here. So
No, I hear where you're coming from, and I mean, even though I haven't been to Europe, I do have fans from Europe and over in Europe, and they tell us to get out there, and as much as I've been able to just canvas the U.S. back and forth over the years, I haven't I knew it would take a lot of time and a lot of energy to get that whole thing going. And I'm hoping it will happen soon, maybe a few years after the Corona thing. But I hear that. I hear the similar reports from the people who are fans over there and people who have been over there on tour and just music fans from over there and all that. So I've heard that before for sure. So let's go back a little bit, because I always love to hear about where you come from as a person, but also where you come from as a musician and I was listening to that new album. I definitely heard some kind of crystal clear influences there, and a lot that aren't so crystal clear, but kind of tell us where you come from. And well, there was one song I heard that was very Lou Reed / Velvet Underground.
The Lonely.
I think it was Lonely One. Yeah. That one I was like, wow, this is a good. Who did I just say? Lou Reed. But it sounded great. I mean, it was you, but it's the influence, of course. But tell us where you come from, what the people, when you started playing, and then who really revved your engines.
Yeah, I grew up in East Texas in like small towns, and there's sort of and this was in the 90s, so it's sort of like a blues, like electric blues, Texas electric blues thing is sort of king there. I mean, there's also people my age at the time, I was a teenager, that were in bands and stuff, and it was like you're either into blues or you're into like Pantera and heavy metal, and there wasn't a lot of in between. And I was definitely into blues because my dad listened to blues, like old Delta blues and country blues and stuff, like Bucka White, especially Son House, guys that played National Resonator guitars. And I mean, those, like these things,
Yeah, I've seen you play that many times.
So they were around my house. That one was around my house growing up. It belonged to my dad. I kind of
oh wow,
borrowed
cool.
it. And so I grew up playing in those kind of clubs and stuff, but I never really got into electric blues. It was just like so I could get on a stage and play. And I was really into this guy Chris Whitley, who's a huge influence on me as a young man. I mean, and still, but also I was getting into punk rock, and I mean punk rock, I mean like New York, and before that, like things that were important to me when I was really young were like David Bowie, like at the time, like glam David Bowie, even though I'm more into like Berlin David Bowie or Station to Station now, but like Ziggy Stardust and also the Stooges, and that led to like Patti Smith and Richard Hell and stuff like that. And so I kind of was a man of two minds, I guess. But I don't know. I was just sort of feeling my way out and trying to figure out what was realistic, what could I do. So I sort of did like the, guitar slinger blues guy thing, East Texas thing. And then I moved to Austin when I was 18 in 1999 and continued to do that. I had a little side adventure into like sort of playing at emos and stuff like that, like punk rock. Not punk rock really, it was more of like emo, screamo type stuff. I played guitar in a band, and that was because I thought that we would like, get girls and get famous and stuff. And also I wanted to play a Les Paul with a Marshall and, kind of live out some sort of Slash fantasy or something. But
how did that turn out for you?
Well, this is when I went on my first tour. That was a band that I went on the first tour with. I booked it. We went up to, out across the West to San Francisco and back when I was 24.
Mm-hmm.
And
that was fun.
Yeah, and I knew that I wanted to do it, but also I saw right before we left for that tour, like a month before, I saw the Townes Van Zandt documentary at the theater, the Be Here to Love Me. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's really good. Saw it like
I did. I saw it a while ago. I want to see it again, actually, now that you bring it up.
Yeah, it was really inspiring, and I knew when I saw it, I was like, I have to quit this band. Like I can't do this. I want to be one of these type of guys. Kind of. I'm very ambivalent about the fact that I'm from Texas. Like I love Towns Van Zandt, but the the genre of Texas singer songwriter is something that I don't like relate to at all.
Mhm.
Because I was always into Bowie and you know shit that's a little more like arty and reflexive. Not so earnest and you know quote unquote real, which whatever that means. I like a little bit more of a performative aspect, a little bit more of a,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Like
Of course, absolutely, yeah.
paradoxically, it's a little bit more authentic, I think, uh, to put on a show. But
I agree with that. Actually, I agree with that.
yeah, so after we got back from that tour, the band broke up on tour, and me and the drummer Jeremy started the Sideshow Tragedy, and we went on tour for about 11 years after that, and made records in between, and it sort of evolved from a singer songwriter thing into a very much like punk blues kind of thing. There's a lot of um, like Led Zeppelin, but also
Hmm.
Gun Club, Nick Cave kind of thing, like dark gothic
Hmm.
punk blues, whatever, and
Hmm.
but like heavy and also more of that like British blues sounding thing from the '70s. And into like what we've done now. It kind of started with the last record, View from Nowhere, where there's like I just started to hear more, I guess, melodies or a little bit more pop stuff, and that's also what I sort of gravitated towards listening to. It's like, I mean, when we were making this record or writing the songs for this record, I was listening to a lot of like In Excess and stuff from the '80s, some kind of
Yeah, I can hear that a bit too.
yeah, and
I
it
could
was
definitely hear the Bowie. I can hear the Bowie in there for sure
yeah,
too. The Bowie and Lou Reed are at times are interchangeable at times, and yeah, I can
yeah,
hear that for
Bowie
sure.
and Lou Reed is, I mean, that honestly, I've never like I have certainly will cop to aping many people uh, on guitar. I mean, obviously, anybody that knows Chris Whitley's stuff can can hear his thing and what I do on a resonator for sure. I mean, like I've definitely copied him, and I don't know, maybe there's definitely like Keith Richards stuff and things like that I've done. But the Lou Reed thing, I didn't actually consciously set out to do that. And my producer noticed that I was kind of doing it on a couple songs, a couple records back, and it just sort of became this thing. He said, "Whatever you're doing, that really works. So keep doing that." And so that's kind of, and now I sort of like write with that in mind and sort of think of it as like it is a voice, it's a persona, and I love like Leonard Cohen too, and these
Hmm.
guys that are and Bob Dylan is like this as well, but it's I mean, it's there's so much, those guys get so much credit for their lyrics approaching poetry. It's not quite poetry, but they're known for being like these very literate, sophisticated songwriters, and I don't think that enough people talk about their delivery and their phrasing, because and I also think they're all very funny, and I hope that you got and that people get that even though this is a record about divorce, uh, it's supposed to be funny. I'm like, these are the songs are, it's I'm joking around a whole lot, but it can be, um, I don't know. You always wonder if that shit lands. So, but
Yeah, well, first of all, there's so much good stuff in there, so I'm gonna just do my best here, but um, it does land. I did pick up on that, and I love when all the emotions are sprinkled into music. I mean, when they're sprinkled into anything, books, movies, whatever. But I think often humor, and not to sound pretentious here, I have no problem sounding pretentious when talking about music. By the way, I think it's
I'm very
fun.
pretentious, please.
It's fun. You got to be pretentious to be a rocker, but um, but now I lost my train of thought. My own pretension. No, but
Humor.
the humor. Yeah, I if I laugh at something or with something, I do not dismiss it. You know what I mean? I love to laugh, and anytime it's incorporated in music or whatever, I don't dismiss it as something that's trying to be campy or funny. I love it for what it is. And so I think a lot of people think about adding humor into music. It's can be campy, goofy, it can be Weird Al, whatever. I love Weird Al, but it's like I love it when it's in there. I always pick up on it, and so kudos for throwing that in there.
Well, yeah.
Now,
Oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh, I was
Go
going to say,
ahead.
like, Leonard Cohen is very funny. I mean, like a record like I'm Your Man.
Oh yeah.
I mean, all that stuff is, I mean, and it's like dark too, right? Like he's the Prince of Darkness or whatever. But I mean, and people have said that there's like a lot of press or people even in my personal life would be like, oh, I'm so serious. I'm a very dark guy. And I mean, but life is dark, and also the subject matter that I tend to gravitate towards, whether it be some sort of like, um, late stage capitalist dystopia or existential ennui or getting a divorce. It's like, but it's still funny to me, like I still want to be able
For sure.
to laugh and not, yeah, I mean, it's almost like gallows humor.
I, yeah, man, I'm with you. And there's a lot of people. Well, Dylan, I want to get into so much what you said because I agree with you about Dylan and his phrasing and his voice. I'm not one of these people who thinks the last 15 years his voice is salvageable personally, but his first 30, 35, 40 years, well, let's say 30. I
Yeah.
love Dylan, and his voice is weird and at times, downright not a good voice. Fantastic. I love Dylan and his phrasing and his voice. But
What does
yeah,
that
Peter
mean,
Tosh.
good voice? Like people say that, and I don't even
Oh
know.
yeah, I mean in rock and roll, this
Well,
goes
like
out
I
the
mean,
window.
like a good voice or whatever is like, I don't know, someone who can sing really well or something. Like it's like it's the Olympics or sports or something. It's more about like how successful is the artist at conveying what they're trying to convey. And I don't think
Right.
anybody does that better than Dylan. I think that what he's doing is, I mean, I guess like the timbre of his voice is, grating. I think Bowie said he had a voice like sand and glue, um, which kind of sums it up. But I mean, it's beautiful, and I believe him. When he sings.
And his sense of melody is kingly. he's a master of melody. I mean, there's no question about it. He's on the same level as the Beatles and all those guys. He's a master of melody, no question. But I'm trying to get back into a lot of stuff you said. But you mentioned obviously blues, so that reads right away. The first time I met you playing the resonator, I knew that was in there. But then you mentioned punk. One thing I've always kind of like to flesh out with myself and people I talk to is I think blues without question is the most influential music of the 20th century. I mean, just mathematically, it all comes back to that, right? So, if you know about rock and roll, the tree, everything, it kind of goes back to blues, right? So hugely influential. I think punk is the second most influential musical form of the 20th century. I think, blues gave the entire canon of the last 100 years its feel and its simplicity, and punk gave the second half of it its attitude. You know what I mean? I mean, rock and roll had become past its prime, not in every case, but it was starting to get a little pretentious. You know what I mean? And not the good kind of pretentious, not like stand on top of a mountaintop and give these people a show, but more like head up your own ass a little bit. And then punk came along and just decked everybody and was like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. Let's just play this thing fast and hard and simple. And I think it's hugely influential. That's my
Right.
opinion on
And
punk.
yeah, punk is like, I mean, it's an attitude, but I mean, also that attitude that goes back to Dylan because,
Yeah, that's a good
you know,
point.
if you've seen No Direction Home, the Scorsese
Yeah,
documentary, the '66
yeah,
tour.
and the whole going electric thing. I mean, you're right about that.
Yeah, and I mean, he wasn't pandering to his audience; he was deliberately antagonizing them. And I think Hank Williams used to do that actually, but I mean, so that sort of spirit of what became punk rock predates it a lot. But like Dylan
It's a
was
good
doing
point.
it, you know, and yeah, you know, I mean that's always been. I love, not necessarily antagonize an audience, although I certainly have, but never be there. Like, not that there's anything wrong with it either, but like, never be like, "How you guys doing tonight? Y'all having fun?" You know, like I'm here. You know, like that has always, like, if I'm at a show and somebody's doing that, like I feel like I'm at like an elementary school assembly or something. You know, it's like don't 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 pander to me. You know, just do your thing. You know, and see if it
Mm,
resonates. It
yeah,
feels like corny, I guess is the word. And so I've never
yeah,
felt comfortable doing it. Because it's not about having a good time, you know, for me. Uh it's about getting over, it's about communication, it's almost a ritual, you know. It's physical, it's psychosexual, there's all kinds of weird shit going on when a band
hmm
plays, you know. And I think that what you're saying about rock and roll becoming lame is that it became this thing where it was like, I mean, there is like the hero worship. Like if you watch, like, Song Remains the Same, Zeppelin at Madison Square Garden, where it's like they're these, Norse gods on the mountaintop, and there's
yeah.
the ocean of followers. And then punk wasn't about that at all. It was about, I mean, it was reflexive in a way that rock and roll took itself way too seriously at that point, and punk did not.
Yeah,
You and there's just a whole lot more. There's a lot more interesting shit going. I mean, at least with the New York stuff, and I mean, also like I love, the Damned and the Sex Pistols and the Clash, the shit that came out of England too, even into like L.A. in the late '70s, early '80s with um, Flesh Eaters and the Germs and X and that kind of thing. That is sort of like those are like areas of punk where it was like something exciting and interesting is going on that has nothing to do with the sporting event that rock and roll became in the early '70s and mid '70s. Because before that, and in the late
definitely.
'60s, like with Hendrix and shit, it was like this. I don't know, like it was like some kind of Dionysian.
It was so much at that time. It was the most intensely creative dynamic you could imagine. It was a perfect storm of creativity at the late '60s to the end of that decade. It was just like, it was insane how much was going on then. But then once that era kind of hit that high point, there was nowhere to go but down. And yeah, people started taking themselves too seriously. There wasn't as many causes that were kind of causing polarization and people getting up and fighting for rights of people and war and but yeah, no, I'm 100%. That's you said something in there. Oh, what was it? Blah, blah, blah. I forgot. Maybe it'll come back to me. But no. Oh yeah. I mean, and metal pretty much comes from punk. I would say it does because
metal.
there's a lot. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other influences in metal, blues, and more even like classical stuff with metal. But that attitude of
When you say
metal,
metal, like
I
which like who are you like? What era or what bands? I mean, you mean like
well, so
like Sabbath?
okay, so Sabbath,
Because those guys are metal.
Sabbath. No, you're right. Sabbath is the start for sure, and you could even say maybe Zeppelin, but Sabbath, maybe even some of those other beast mode people.
Well, at the
But
time, what I mean is that at the time they were called heavy metal. Like before
yeah,
any later Judas Priest or any of that kind of thing started to happen.
Yeah, no, I mean more what kind of started in the 80s with like Motorhead transitioning
Oh,
this
Motorhead.
like punk feel. Yeah, Motorhead was a big part of it, right? Because they were like punk, but they were something else too. And then from there, metal kind of really
Yeah.
got its feet going. But yeah, I love that. I could talk about this stuff all day. But so let's talk a little bit about you in Austin. So you said you've been here since, did you say 99?
I've been here since 1999. Yeah.
So you've been here for a couple decades now. So you've seen, yeah, it's about twice as long as I've been here. Because yeah, exactly twice as long. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your experience with Austin through those 20 years? I mean, you experienced 20 great years of Austin. I mean, I personally, I was planning on moving before the pandemic to Los Angeles, and I have a lot of love for Austin, but I was ready to move on. I think over the last few years, it's become, who knows what it's going to become now? No telling what's going to happen now. But prior to the pandemic, the last few years, I was looking for a little bit more, but I felt like I did catch a good 5-6 years of really good Austin. But you've been here a really good chunk. So tell us a little bit about your kind of evolution in Austin, how you got going, and what you think of the city then and now and all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, when I moved here in 1999, it was like very shortly after Liberty Lunch closed down. And everyone told me that I missed it. Austin was over. So, it's kind of like, and people say this about New York as well, that it's over, or they've been saying that for a while. And I didn't go to New York until the early 2000s. I'd never been until then. And it was first time I went to New York was right after CBGB's closed down. Like it had closed down a few months before I got there. And not that CBGB's was any kind of happening spot by that point. It was one
Landmark.
of those showcase clubs, where you go play for
Yeah.
like 12 bands in one night, all that kind of thing. But I don't know. I mean, the town it's kind of like if you live somewhere, you don't notice the things changing because you're there all the time.
Sure.
But it's definitely changed a lot in 20 years. It seems to have lost a little bit, and it isn't just about the rent going up or about the influx of all of like tech industry and all of the, I don't know, like bourgeois catering that goes on the part of the city and the business, the restaurant, all these types of things. That goes on. It just it has way less of like a bohemian flavor, but so does like every city in the United States, really, that was famous for it. Whether it be New York City or San Francisco. Like in 99, I'll tell you what I know is different is because I was at UT, and so I was on the drag every day, and there was a record where the Daniel Johnston mural is. That used to be a record store called Sound Exchange. They used to buy records there, and there was like a head shop called Pipes Plus. There were people on the street. There were street people everywhere, which I mean, there still kind of is, but it wasn't like it was. I mean, it was like a very much like it was a whole subculture happening in the middle of the day, and then it intensified at night with people trying to sell you drugs all the time, and a lot of street musicians. It was wilder, and maybe it was less safe. I don't know. I don't really think about that kind of thing, but like it was a lot more interesting. And you would meet a lot more interesting people because the record stores and the head shops and the university, the young people, just the whole thing. And there was a lot of coffee shops too. They also sold beer. Like, so they would be these places that people hung out. There was this place called Mojo's that was open 24 hours. And you could go in there at like 3 o'clock in the morning and you would definitely meet some very interesting people. And the same thing downtown on 4th and Lavaca, was where Ruta Maya was. And it was also, if it wasn't open 24 hours, it was open till like 4 or 5 in the morning. And there was all kinds of characters, and that, being a kid from small town East Texas, that was kind of like why I wanted to move here, was to just sort of be in a place where shit like that existed, where you would run into people like that, where you would meet people and it would be interesting, and you need it. It's sort of they were like little ecosystems, and so that to me is what, in my day-to-day life as a guitar player and a songwriter, and a person who moved to this town to do that because he watched Slacker when he was in junior high or whatever, was to be around people like that. And so with the gentrification, aside from, I haven't even gone into what it's done to, the communities east of 35, now that it's doing, in the South, sort of, pushing out the people that have lived there for decades and decades and decades and making it unaffordable. I mean, anytime you open the Chronicle, this is like a major issue, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like in general, not to sound negative, like I don't want to, I mean, it is a negative thing that's happening. And it's sad to me that these things that I liked about the town are gone now. But yeah, so I guess all of that is to say that Austin is worse than it was 20 years ago. If you happen to be a certain type of person that values certain types of things and finds certain types of things interesting. But you could say the same thing about San Francisco or New York. So perhaps it's at least nationwide trend.
No, I think that's everything you just said. As much as you may have thought like you weren't quite, kind of hitting what you wanted on the head, you did hit something on the head for me, because as much as I've talked to people about Austin who have lived here for this amount of time or that amount of time, that's a pretty, I haven't really heard it put that way in terms of, and it's simple, it's obvious, but it you fleshed it out nicely just in terms of the characters, the characters are what I'm with you 100%. And I know a lot of people like us are, you want to meet weird people. I mean, it's the moniker of the city, right? So that has definitely changed. There's no question about that. And as you said, aside from the rent going up, aside from the gentrification, aside from the bourgeois catering, that's one of the big things we've lost, is the true weirdness, the authentic weirdness of the city. And it's become a really lovely city. It's great for families. I have a family. It's great for families. It's got a lot of good food.
I have a kid and an ex-wife, and so I know about like the family life, and I think that that's important. But that great for families thing is, I feel like
relative. It's relative.
I feel like it's a dog whistle, for it's safe or whatever.
Right.
Again, safe for who? What does that mean?
Yeah.
I think it's dog whistle for like pro gentrification rhetoric,
for sure,
and pro keep poor people out of my face. I don't want to see any of that. And also, it's boring. Any place
it is boring.
Great for families, that's synonymous with boring.
That's true. That's 100% true. And that's one of the reasons we were leaving. It's like it's not the most boring city in the country. In fact, it's probably one of the most non-boring cities in the country. And to your other point, which is something I've also touched on before, just in conversation with people, is that I don't think there's no such things as scenes anymore. They don't exist. The scene is online. A scene, Austin had a scene, Chicago in the 20s had a scene. New York's always had a scene, or at least on and off through the last 100 years. And LA's had scenes on and off. And San Francisco, of course, has had scenes. Seattle had a scene. They don't exist anymore. It's all on the ground level. All the cities have become gentrified and boring and safer and more expensive. And there haven't been very many vital scenes that have popped up. Rather, everything is just centralized into the central intelligence thing that we are all slaves to, for better or for worse. You know, the scene is TikTok and Instagram. So I don't know if there will be scenes in the future. I would hope so, but as of right now, my theory is they're done. There won't be any more scenes.
There will be,
Hope
because
you're right.
I think that, I mean, you look at like this time, and I mean, not to predict the future or anything like that, but you know, it's sort of like with how reliant on technology everyone is, like what we're doing right now. I mean, this is Star Trek shit, you know?
Yeah, it is.
And it's also really new, and it's like ebooks, you know, ebooks like on a Kindle or whatever, you know. It's there are a lot of people talk about that. That's what they do, or they listen to podcasts. Like that's like, you know, people are always listening to podcasts, but all of that shit is new, and it relies heavily on this like elaborate network of a bunch of technology functioning. And you know, books by comparison do not. So I feel like a scene is just any kind of thing where a bunch of people who are into the same thing, you know, artistic scenes, we mean. So like it could be painting, or it could be you know, theater, it could be poetry, it could be punk rock, it could be whatever. But you know, you go out into a place and you find other people that are doing it, and then you guys all hang out and do it together, and do it against each other, and do it with each other, and talk shit about each other, and praise each other, all that kind of thing. Like that'll never go away as long as people's immediate needs, as long as it's not some kind of post-apocalyptic wasteland, and there's some kind of like semblance of a structure that we can live in, you know, where it's like, I don't know, I mean, you could do it. I mean, like if you look at, I mean, like people in, you know, punk rockers and stuff, guys just eat dog food and heroin, you know. So it's like it's very much a street thing, and I think that I don't think that they're just like these like spontaneous human communities, you know, and it's almost like people would have, the internet can't replace it, I guess is what I mean, you know. Like it's had
I don't
to.
know. I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I am seeing other signs that I kind of fundamentally disagree with you, but like I said, I hope you're right. Because if you look at scenes, okay, let's say before 1900, how many scenes were there in the world compared to how many scenes there were in that century? There were, let's just say randomly, 50 great artistic scenes the whole century. There are probably more like 300, all right? Whether it's Japan in the 80s, New York 8 different times, London in the 60s, you know, blah, 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 right? Let's say there's 300. How many were there before that? Not that many, way less. So it could have just been a 20th century phenomenon, the scene thing. We don't, I don't know, man. I don't even know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that I
I
think
don't
it's
even know
like,
what I'm talking about.
I think about like, you know, I mean, Paris in the 1800s was definitely a.
Sure, that's one. They're out there, but the
I mean,
point is that
I mean, it's one city, but there was a lot of scenes, you know, like
I hear you.
art scenes, movements, you know, the Belle Epoque, and but then that's also like that perhaps, I mean, because it's a 20th century thing, it's symptomatic of modernity, you know. So, you know, you have
I think a
transportation,
better
communication, that kind of thing. You know, probably, I mean, sure, it contributed to it in some way, you know.
for sure. I don't know. I didn't really have a end point or even middle point with where I was going there. I think the more threatening thing is this whole hyper individualization, right? It's really, we've taken the individual and the importance of the individual, which I believe in wholeheartedly, to this really extreme level with the iPhone and the everyone's a celebrity and blah, blah, blah. So I guess that more so of everyone's so into themselves, how far is that going to go? And will that be an issue? Because that's what the internet is, right? It's like yourself projected to the world, and the world looking at you, and you looking at other people, and you know, the intimacy, real intimacy and real human contact is lost. So hopefully this next generation, man, who knows what's going to happen with these kids who are dealing with this pandemic. There probably will be scenes, man. They're going to be so starved for human anything. So you're probably right.
Yeah, well, that's, I mean, we're talking about like, I mean, I know like, I mean, if this wasn't a pandemic, I would assume that we would be, you know, you and I would be talking in person right now, you know?
But we wouldn't. That's the truth and the key of it. We wouldn't.
Oh, we wouldn't?
We realistically, we would not.
Oh,
right?
okay. Well,
I mean, you and I,
like, you want to do this interview, let's meet at, I don't know, you know, Cosmic Coffee and Beer Garden. And I'd be like, okay, it's close enough to my place. I'll see you there at 7. Like, that's something that is normal to me, like to go something like that and do this, and preferable, just because I like to be out. And so, I don't know. I mean, I know what you're saying. I mean, you're saying how far can that go with the iPhone individualization or whatever? Like go towards what you mean, like making some kind of interesting art, or because
I don't want to get too off topic, but I was really just the idea of the scene is something I've thought about, and I to my you know, just as my observing goes, just the evaporating of scenes, like you mentioned. I mean, they've kind of evaporated in terms of what scenes we've been used to over the last 50, 60 years in terms of an artistic community taking over a city or a town, building up, being very creative. Then the inevitable happens where it becomes very cool. Everybody wants to move there. It becomes bougie. It becomes lame. Right. So
I think I see what you're saying now. I kind of missed that before. And I think I think you're definitely right. I think that it will come back, but I do think that we're very much in a, I don't know, it's a dark time for stuff like that, you know. It's boring and not interesting.
yeah, I was talking more on like a city scene, you know, like a specific city scene, like you were talking about San Fran, rather than, I mean, there'll be these micro scenes, no doubt, people getting together talking about music and poetry and stuff like that. But so to kind of round this all out, what do you and the band and yourself, what are you planning, as much as you can plan, for the next, 4 to 6 to 12 months for yourself?
Well, I mean, that's all contingent on what happens with the pandemic, of course. But I mean, the plan is to tour whenever that is feasible. Europe, at least. I don't know about the United States. So,
do you think it'll be harder? Do you think it'll be harder to get over to Europe now in any sort of near future with all those countries and the pandemic? I mean, I would think that could be, fortunately, further off than domestic touring, right?
Oh,
maybe not.
Maybe. Domestic touring at this point is not. I mean, outside of like, I would definitely want to play at the Continental Club again. But it's, like for us, I want to go where people,
I hear you.
Where there seems to be like people are like wanting us to be there. You know what I'm saying? Like, people are like, oh, we got to get you over here. We got to do this. We got to do this. And it's like, well, I'll go do that. But I mean, and no disrespect to anybody that loves the Sideshow Tragedy in Nashville, which I love Nashville, but like I don't know that us playing in Nashville really matters, So at this point, maybe it did.
I know what you mean. Exactly. So I hear what you mean.
It means a lot. I want to go back to Europe and see what happens. But yeah, right now, I mean, we can't even enter the country, period, for any reason. So, and then, and I don't know domestically how who knows, man, I haven't even actually thought about what this would look like until you brought it up like this, but I don't even know what it's going to be like to tour. It's crazy. Yeah,
man. I mean, everyone's going to be ready to play music and see music. The problem is going to be the infrastructure. What is that infrastructure going to look like when you got everybody trying to get on the runway at the same time?
Oh, it's all backed up too, for sure. Like people,
it's going to be
there's going to be a period of time where, and the little guys don't get to do anything because they're so backed up doing makeup shows that are definitely going to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I've actually talked to some people, and in France about that. They're like, well, so when touring becomes a thing, then it's still going to be a little time for you to wait because we have to make sure that all of the big guys get to tour first, because the canceled tours that they were supposed to do is what everybody really wants to happen. So, you know, unless we can piggyback on something bigger than us, it's going to be a while, I guess. So,
Yeah. What are your favorite spots over in Europe? The favorite places to go back to play in?
my favorite cities, or
Yeah, favorite cities, countries, cultures over there that you really love more than some of the others.
good. You know, I love going to. Well, I love large cities, and you know, cities you can walk in, cities with a lot of culture in the street. So you know, uh, New York is like a favorite city of mine because it is very much one of those kinds of places. But also in Europe, it would be, I don't know. I love Paris. I like the intellectual and artistic history of the city. You know, you can walk around and pretend that you're Baudelaire, and or Van Gogh or whatever. I also, you know, and then Amsterdam is a nice one. That's Berlin. But I mean, as far as playing goes, I mean, we've had like amazing shows in like the most unlikely places, and then
Mhm.
shows that were supposed to be really cool turn out to just be eh. So
Yeah.
I kind of think of it more of like, I don't know. My interest in love affair with cities is kind of separate from playing in them, you know.
Yeah, for
So
sure. I think that happens on the road too. I don't know what your tours look like over there, but obviously, if anyone used to touring, is you only get little snippets of time to really experience the city. If you get to go back a few times, you get a little bit more. Maybe if you're lucky, you have a couple days off, but I'm
yeah, I
sure
like
go ahead.
to walk around them by myself,
Mhm.
preferably late at night. So
Nice. Nice.
wherever sounds like it would be really cool to do that, those are like the places that I like to go. So,
Beautiful.
you know,
Cool, buddy. Well, I hope you guys can get over this soon. I hope we can all get back to it soon, but who
likewise, man.
knows, man. Yeah, dude. Thanks for doing this, Nathan. I really appreciate it, man. Love the new record, and hopefully see you on stage soon, my friend.
Likewise, thanks, Sam.
All right. Peace, buddy.
Yeah.